In this episode of Raddest Rides in 80s action figures, we'll take a look at the good, the cartoony, and the downright bizarre. So, stick around. Hello fellow dorks and dorkettes, and welcome to Nostalgia Syndrome. My name is Rob, and in this episode we will be looking at more of the raddest rides in 80s action figures. Before we get started, I always like to talk about what the criteria is to be on the raddest rides in 80s action figures list. Number 1, the vehicle or ride has to accommodate a figure of some sort. And when I say accommodate, I mean sit in it, sit on top of it, pilot it, use a cannon, what have you. Just some way, shape, or form, it has to be made for a figure. Number 2, and this is one that's a little iffy, but this is one of my own private little rules, and that is it can't be from a vehicle-based toy line like Mask or Steel Monsters. It has to be one of those sold separately type of items. And yes, sometimes they come packaged with a driver or figure of some sort. And we're not talking about those. We're talking about the whole line is practically based on a vehicle. So we are not going to discuss those because those toy lines deserve their own spotlight, and I will get to that one day, hopefully soon. Now that all the stupid little rules that only I care about are out of the way, let's get to number 1. Number 1 on the list is the Calliope Cab for the Clown Around toy line released by Mego in 1981. Now these little minifigs are very reminiscent of Smurfs. I can only imagine Mego kind of smelled blood in the water because the Smurf minifigures were released in Europe during the 70s, and they knew those little blue beauties were going to hit the shores of America at any time. So they struck while the iron was hot to produce little mini clowns that, like Smurfs, are profession-based personalities for the characters. I mean, they had everything from Ronald Reagan, Superman, an awesome samurai one, and some that would be a little insensitive, even for the 80s. Now, I would love to talk about the Clown Around toy line a little bit more, and one day I will. But today, we're going to talk about the Calliope Cab. Now, the packaging states that this fanciful cab was used to escort clowns around Clown City. I, for one, would love a ride in this cab around Clown City, I guess, if I don't have a choice, because this wagon is being drawn by a unicorn named Chauncey. That's pretty awesome. Not only that, it comes packaged with a clown. Cabby Clown. I mean, would he be named anything else? But Cabby Clown sits in a little compartment at the top, and he could either be facing forward to drive the wagon and control Chauncey, or he could turn backwards and tickle the ivories on this Calliope. And to be honest, the detailing on the pipes of the Calliope are pretty nice. They're actually golden, and it looks to be a sticker for the actual keyboard itself. At the end of the day, it's a solid little vehicle with a unicorn and a clown. And believe me, out of the big scheme of things, this clown is pretty tame compared to some of the other ones. But like I said, in the future, I would love to take a look at some of the standout clowns in this toy line that had 65 figures to it. Now, number 2 on the list comes from a cartoon series that was released in 1986. This cartoon series capitalized on one of the many fads that happened throughout the 1980s. This fad was the baby/kid trend of taking older properties and reinventing them as children. I can only imagine that this trend was kicked off by Muppets Take Manhattan with the Muppet Babies and the cartoon that arrived afterwards. Anyway, this time it is the Flintstone Kids, and the vehicle is the Dream Chimp limo, released by Coleco in 1986. Now, I have to say, I did watch the show, but I really don't have any recollection of any of the high points from it, other than it was kid versions of Fred, Wilma, Barney, Betty, and all their friends at the time that didn't age up with them, so they must have all been eaten by saber-toothed tigers. Anyway, the Dream Chimp limo, I thought, got its name because it's being controlled and powered by a chimp. Out of the front of this log limo is a chimp, and his tail kind of dangles down from underneath, but I don't see any legs, so maybe he's pedaling the front wheels. I don't know. Maybe there's more detail to this toy that I don't see in the pictures. But like I said, the Dream Chimp name doesn't come from this dapper primate. It comes from the character Dream Chimp Gemstone, who was the rich girl of the group. On the packaging, you see her and Fred palling around in this chimp-powered limo. And I'm really confused that why someone would name, even in a prehistoric setting, their kid Dream Chimp. That just does not roll off the tongue. And like I said, I thought that name came from the chimp piloting this vehicle. Now, the one feature of these figures by Coleco was that each individual character came with a small vehicle, either it be a tricycle, a scooter, skateboard, something like that. But they did have a few vehicles like this limo. Now, I remember the cartoon being on for maybe a couple seasons, but it was one of those Hanna-Barbera products where they just jammed a whole bunch of other Flintstones related things to make like a Power Hour kind of cartoon block. So I really don't have a recollection of how long this actually aired, because like I said, it was jam-packed with other Flintstones related media. And it's kind of weird to realize that the Flintstones had a permanent space in Saturday mornings for like a couple decades. But I'll give Hanna-Barbera props for just trying something a little bit different with the tried and true Flintstones formula. Number 3 is from an often forgotten toy line. And it's kind of criminal that it's forgotten because it's a really neat supernatural themed action figure toy line. And that is the Infaceables, released by Galoob in 1984. Now, the vehicle that we will be looking at is the Horrible Hammer. Before we take a look at the Horrible Hammer in what details I have, let's talk about the Infaceable figures. They had a feature that you would kind of pull up on them, and in doing so, you're making the rubberized faces of the action figures go taunt against a molded face that would be underneath. Now, this molded face would have, monstrous or animal-like features, so when you're stretching it across, it would create different details in the character's face. Now, that being pushed to the side, and that's pretty awesome. I don't know how well that rubber would hold up or anything really about it. I just remember seeing them in the stores and really liking them, and yeah, I was a fan, even though I never had any. But anyway, to the Horrible Hammer. Now, this is kind of disappointing because with the size of this vehicle, it only accommodates one action figure, who sits all the way in the back on a little tiny platform with a shield with little tinted, viewers that he can look through. Now, the action feature of the horrible hammer was what took up all the space. And as the name tells you, it's a hammering mechanism. You would have this long, actually rubber-tipped mallet that you would snap up onto it. And the driver, there's a little trigger that when you hit it, it would BAM! So you have this thing with armored tread all along its sides with this huge hammer for kind of a, one-trick action feature, but I could see that action feature being used against a plethora of different action figures. Either they be Masters of the Universe, G.I. Joe, Visionaries, what have you. You could really hammer the crap out of a lot of evil or good forces depending on how you were rolling at the time. Either way, Infaceables is a toy line that I wish I had partaken in while I was a kid, and I have no idea what they go for nowadays on the market, and maybe it'll be something that I explore in the future. Either way, supernatural-based toy lines should have been much more popular at the time because, to be honest, that's awesome. And it's something that we really don't see anymore. So it was one of those, we should have enjoyed it while it lasted. Number 4 comes from a toy line that we've actually talked about before in Raddest Rides, and that is Barnyard Commandos, released by Playmates in 1989. Last time we talked about a vehicle that was part of the Pork's Army. This time we will talk about one of the Ram's vehicles, and it is the Bacon Bomber. The Bacon Bomber is an awesome biplane. And it comes with really neat features that really capitalized on the barnyard aesthetic of the toy line. It has everything from corncob grenades to watermelon bombs. On top of that, it has really neat cartoony styled machine guns on top, and the Ram pilot sits in a little wooden crate to pilot this awesome Bacon Bomber. I have to admit, Barnyard Commandos was a toy line that I had not one single care in the world about. It was only until recently I saw how awesome these toys really were. I mean, again, it's one of those things where you learn to appreciate pretty much everything from your childhood. The good, the bad, the weird, what have you. And with adult eyes, you just see how awesome and fun it really was. And the Bacon Bomber looks like the true definition of fun. Everything from its realistic, movable propeller to its weird, warped wheels, as it says, that makes every landing a test of courage. You also have to give Playmates props, because even the little details on the back of the package, telling you what, play features it has, were really well written and really funny and unique. Like the wheel gag. Just weird warped wheels make every landing a test of courage. That's pretty cool and a great way to advertise if you were to read every little blurb that's on the back of the box. Anyway, I've become a fan of the Barnyard Commandos in the 30-odd years since it was released. And yeah, this Bacon Bomber would be a great addition to anyone's collection. Number 5 on the list comes from a toy line that we also talked about in a past episode. And that toy line is really one of my favorites from the 80s, and that is Cops. This time we're talking about the vehicle Pursuit Jet, released by Hasbro in 1988. Now, the Pursuit Jet, as the package states on the back, is an aerodynamic, one-manned little aircraft. And yes, like all the awesome Cops toys, it has cap-firing guns. This time it is a centrally located, mounted muzzle blaster, I believe they call it, that you put a roll of caps into and fire away. That was an awesome play feature. And again, it's one of those toy lines that I regrettably had let go at the time that I wish I still had today. I had a lot of the figures because unfortunately they ended up in the clearance aisles, and that was where my parents got most of my toys. And to be honest, when like this was released in '88, I was 12, and I think to today's standards that's way too old to still be playing with toys. But I think back then in the '80s we kind of were allowed to play with toys longer, even though I was bullied for it. But that's a story I've already talked about, and we don't need to address it anymore. Anyway, the Pursuit Jet, awesome. It was actually for the cops themselves and not the crooks. So it had that sleek white and blue aesthetic that most of their vehicles had. And it had a little red light, not battery operated, just one of those things that had a reflective piece of, foil inside of it that when you would spin it, it would catch the light and look like it was, lighting up. Kind of ingenious and a good way to make it cheaper and battery free. And you needed to keep the cost down for something like this because the cops' figures were pretty big. So even this being a one-person vehicle, it still had some good size to it because the figures themselves were pretty big. One thing that I have to give Hasbro super big props for was their packaging art. We all know how great the G.I. Joe packaging was at the time, and they tried to replicate that with the cops figures. Now, a lot of the artwork for the action figures themselves was done by comic book artist Bart Sears. Now, this vehicle doesn't look like it shares the same art style as a lot of the action figures did, but one of the neat features of the artwork is it included the roll of caps. You can see trailing behind the Pursuit Jet is a red string of caps. It even has the little round indentations of the caps themselves. So just the fact that they incorporated that play feature into the artwork itself, it's a really neat, detail. And like I said, I give Hasbro all the props in the world for their artist-driven package design. So, in summary, I love the Cops toy line. I wish I still had the figures. For some odd reason, I still have like all of their guns, no caps, but all of their guns, but none of the figures, and it really bums me out. So maybe one day I'll be able to stumble upon a few, but I'm really not holding my breath because we all know how crazy the prices of 80s toys are nowadays. So, but maybe one day. Who knows? Anyway, folks, thank you so much for stopping by and checking out these Raddest Rides in 80s action figures with me. To be completely honest with you all, it's been a few weeks since I've actually sat down and filmed. And yeah, if this seems a little bit off, that is the reason. Because I'm just, baby steps working my way up to the schedule that I used to have. And yeah, if it's a little off, please forgive me. It's a real shame that in today's toy market, the vehicle is something that is a very expensive premium. We've seen Hasbro try their hand at the HasLab release of vehicles. Now, the Cobra Hiss that they released was surprisingly popular and hit all of its goals and was fully funded and comes with a lot of really neat extras and action figures. And it had a super high price point, which unfortunately I couldn't even get near. But on the flip side of that coin, we've seen a few HasLab vehicles not make the funding because the prices were so crazy and they crash and burn. No pun intended. So, yeah, it's kind of sad and disheartening that the future of the vehicle is such an expensive endeavor, and Yeah, the few retro G.I. Joe vehicles they released and were at Walmart, that was great. That was a fair price, and you got a really great vehicle for it. But it doesn't seem like that's the trend that's going to continue, and the trend that is set forth is very unfortunate. But anyway, that is one of those things that we can look back with gleeful nostalgia at how prevalent vehicles were back in the day. And if you're lucky, you can still find some of those older ones for a pretty good price. But anyway, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give me a thumbs up. If you got something to say, please leave a comment. I love reading them, and I love getting back to everybody. And if you're new around here and enjoyed this, or any of the other episodes that YouTube is recommending down here, please hit subscribe. And if you hit that little bell icon, you will be notified whenever there's a new episode. So anyway, until next time, thanks for watching. Keep being rad, and stay dorky!